Dr. Harry Colson is a mind tech entrepreneur. Mind tech doesn't exist yet. Freeborn is set a couple of decades into the future. But you look at the course of AI and where we're heading. Well, surely one day, sooner or later, AI is going to start messing with our minds as well. And that's the kind of thing that he's working on. He's working on a project, a new device called Polaris that can help people visualize their memories, step inside their memories, and heal their trauma. And he wants to find this peace and quiet place to work. This he wants to start a new life. He's just recently been divorced. He's just lost his role at the company he founded. His life's in turmoil, so he wants to start again. So he comes to Freeborne, this idyllic, beautiful, picturesque little town in the south of England, in the county of Sussex. Which is many. It's not a real town, but it's many different towns that I've seen. And I grew up in a small country town in the UK. It's Freeborne is very much an amalgamation of those, and he steps off the train, and the first thing he does when he steps off the train is discover a body of a young woman lying in the snow. And this is the first murder that Freeborne has experienced in over a century. So this sets up the inciting incident, as it were. But it's a conflict not just for Harry. He's trying to start a new life, trying to find peace and quiet. Suddenly, all of that's wrenched away from him. But it's also a conflict for the town. It's got a stranger arriving in the town on the night that it's witnessed its first murder in over a century. Well, we're going to start mistrusting that stranger, aren't we? And Harry is, he's fundamentally a good man, and he lives his life by 7 fundamental rules, which are all borrowed from the geek culture of his life growing up. And one of those rules, rule 1, is the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. And that's taken directly from Spock in Star Trek. And he sort of thinks about this as he's getting off the train and seeing this dead body. And he knows he's going to help. Even if it wrenches his life apart, he's going to do everything he can to help. And that's the point of view Harry's coming from. But there's all this huge cast of supporting characters. And I think that the setting of this picturesque little town in the middle of rural England really lends itself to exploring these quirky characters. There's quite a delightful range of dramatis personae that Harry encounters, and they all have, pretty much all of them have their secrets to hide. Whether they're the one responsible for the murder or not, well, we'll find out. But one of my favourite characters to write was Elliot Nwosu, who is the local MP for Freeborne. And a lot of the political influences that I've seen, Elliot is not based on any particular politician I know. He's certainly not based on me, because he's a far murkier character than I would want to represent. But he immediately sees this situation, this murder in his constituency, and he sees it as an opportunity. I describe him as being like a fly drawn to the opportunity of a carcass. And he could be Iago from Othello, he could be Littlefinger from Game of Thrones, but he uses this situation to his advantage to climb up that political ladder. That's the kind of operator that he is. We've got Sachin, who becomes one of Harry's best friends. He's a young British Asian man who is experiencing life caught between two worlds, which I very much experienced growing up in rural England as a British Asian person. And also, we've got River, who's a very quirky hippie character, who runs the Rainbow Cafe. Another one of Harry's closest friends and confidants as he enters the town. And we've got Lauren, who becomes Harry's love interest. She's a neuroscientist, and is very much the philosophical opposite of Harry, because Harry wants to see technology as a way to heal pain, whereas Lauren understands that we can't just short circuit our brains and bypass all of our humanity, and that's ultimately the crux of the philosophical debate in Freeborne. Is what are we? What is human nature? Are we what we were born to be? Are we what society made us? And can technology influence that? Is it influencing? And if it does, is it good or bad? And there are some fantastic moments of debate between Harry and Lauren, where they try to figure out where truth lies, and that's an open question that I hope readers will work out for themselves. When I write characters' dialogue, I always speak it out loud. It's I always go back to that thing that Harrison Ford said to George Lucas. Well, George, you can write this shit, but you can't say it. And it sort of I always have to read it out loud and make sure that what I'm writing is not just words on a page that make sense when the reader reads it back, but is authentic to that character. And the characters are, no character is based on any individual person, but I sort of in my head, from an amalgamation of all sorts of different influences, I developed voices, different accents, different quirks, different mannerisms for every different character, so that hopefully you could read most of the characters, and read their words and know it's them speaking without me saying and Harry said and Lauren said. Because I think I do think that's important. I mean, when we walk around in our everyday lives, we don't all read from the same script and read in the same ways. We all have particular ways we're going to react and particular ways we're going to say things. And I think dialogue's absolutely fascinating. I would certainly credit not just the many people I've met, for being able to form dialogue. TV, theatre. These are great mediums to to influence one on how to construct dialogue. Just as much as the novel is. And I think increasingly in this age of prestige TV that we find ourselves in, I think increasingly the dialogue between these very well developed and well rounded characters we see on our screens these days, absolutely is increasingly coming to influence writers of literary fiction as well. Freeborn, the town, is almost a character in itself, and I do think that's important to see the setting, particularly when we're dealing with these very particular small town settings, which are very different from these huge conglomerations, these huge metropolises that many thrillers are set in. I thought particularly, Freeborn, it's intended to be a page-turning thriller, and I actually thought it was quite quirky to set a page-turning thriller in such a sleepy rural location. I found it quite playful, that juxtaposition between the two. So I very much wanted to draw Freeborn, from the ground up, and have readers enter Freeborn as Harry Colson enters Freeborn. He's a stranger in the town; he's never experienced it before, which allowed me to describe all the quirky details of Freeborn and the people who live there. And as a basis, I first of all I took Sussex, which, if you've ever been there, beautiful county, in the south of England, rolling hillsides, absolutely stunning rural location. And I thought, well, that's going to be where I'm going to plonk Freeborn. So, many towns in that area have the suffix born, Bourne, which is derived from stream. And again, I wanted to be playful with language there. Human freedom comes at the heart of the novel Freeborn. So I thought I could have a little play with language with the title of the town. And in terms of what actually went into the town, well, I grew up in a similar rural setting, and there are basic places that I wanted to sort of draw out. From the church, from museums. From the high street to one of the place that Harry Colson sets up as his workspace is an old Victorian maltings, and I had one of those, where I grew up, disused, damaged, fallen into disrepair. I think they're beautiful buildings. These old Victorian maltings, who would inevitably send half their beer all across the country and feed and supply London's thirsty workers. And then there's my favourite setting in Freeborn is the Rainbow Cafe, which is an amalgamation of every single bohemian venue or music festival I used to go to back when I was a long-haired hippie, and it was just a fun place to have a lot of the characters meet. You could call it your Central Perk, if you will, of Freeborn, and a lot of the quirkiest characters coalesce there in the Rainbow Cafe. We've got one of the characters, the father of the murdered girl, is a British aristocrat, and he has this fantastic palatial country house, which Harry ultimately goes and visits. And these are sort of quintessentially English settings, and I hope I think that these are places. Although somewhat quirkier than most might imagine, these are places that a lot of people in Britain have been to and experienced. And I would hope readers in the US would go, "Isn't that so English?" And that's fun, right? Freeborn is not a police procedural in that sense. The main characters, although it involves police characters, the camera doesn't follow the police characters. The camera actually follows the main suspect in the murder, Harry Colson, as he tries to prove his innocence and as he tries to rebuild his life in this new town. So in a sense, I didn't have to go through all the motions of a police investigation. I actually did read a police training manual on interviews and investigations so that I could be as accurate as possible. And yes, I have, in my journalism, edited magazines that have reported on crimes. But really, ultimately I didn't want it to be a police procedural. I wanted it to be, much more of a philosophical thriller that asks big questions about human freedom and the pace of technology in society. And I used that by following our suspect Harry Colson, and ultimately I decided Freeborn wasn't necessarily going to be a murder mystery at the beginning. It was, I had the concept of what I wanted to do and what I wanted to achieve, and I wanted a structure to wrap it around, a page turning structure that people would read, and it turned out to be a murder mystery. So it almost accidentally became a murder mystery. It wasn't in my front and center of my mind to write a police procedural going into it. Some of the technical advances that we see, probably more, more of the mundane devices we see, which are just sort of everyday. We've got smart glasses that are enabled and can scan for all sorts of technology in the room. We've got driverless taxis in Freeborn now. We've got delivery drones delivering your bed into your back garden. We've got lab grown meat, those sorts of things. But they're not. I wouldn't say that they were sort of hugely impactful in the plot. Where we become really central to the plot is this idea of how AI can now affect the mind, and how there's this emerging field of mind tech. And Harry has invented a device called Polaris, which allows you to see into your memories and then heal your most traumatic ones. So it's better than any drug ever invented at overcoming pain, at overcoming trauma. And that immediately sets off alarm bells ringing for anti-technology activists. They're called anthropros in the book, who put a target on Harry's back as a result of him inventing this technology. And it also comes to the attention of other actors within the novel who think that they can exploit that technology for their own end, and that becomes a huge conflict. Also, there are those who think that the technology is a panacea, and there are those who think that the technology is going to debase what we are as humans. And I think that idea comes from where we are now. Freeborn isn't just a speculative novel that just looks at what's happening in the future. It's a commentary on what's happening now as well. And you look at AI and the pace of technology, and you have to ask yourself, do we really know what we're doing? And Sam Altman, the founder of OpenAI, upon releasing ChatGPT 5, said, "I'm scared." He likened it to the Manhattan Project and said, "I'm scared." And essentially, there's this fear about what we've invented. Can we fully control it? Are there the guardrails? And on the most basic level, we see technology changing the way we work. Massively enhancing the productivity of the workspace. But how many people have lost their jobs as a result of that? A third of graduate entry level jobs in the UK, which people would have spent their entire education working towards, are now gone. So these entry level jobs don't exist anymore, and people have just graduated into economic chaos for their lives. And then how do they ever get to the life?
Same here in the States.
Yeah, and then even deeper than that, I would go so far as to say technology is influencing our minds already. You look at Facebook, you look at X, you look at the algorithms that bubble us into often extreme ideologies and extreme viewpoints. People might have clicked like on one thing or commented on another thing, and suddenly all we're fed in our social media feeds are just more and more of the same, which make people go down rabbit holes. And it could be conspiracy theories, it could be far right ideologies, it could be populist rhetoric. And that, I think, has been deeply damaging for the human psyche, and I think it's deeply damaging for society as a whole. So Freeborn is not anti-technology. I'm actually very pro-technology, but it's just saying, hang on a minute, let's stop and think. Let's make sure we've got the safeguards in place, because where we're going right now could lead us to a very, very dark place. And Freeborn does end in a very, very dark place if we're not careful.